case of Jassie and Mithu. In 1994, in the month of December, in the city of Jagrayan in the Ludhiana district of Punjab, a boy named Sukhand Singh Sidhu, his nickname was Mithu, was standing at a rickshaw stand after playing a kabaddi match, waiting for a rickshaw to go back to his village. He had some friends with him who had come to support him during the match and to boost his morale. During that time in Punjab, there were some rickshaws like the ones you're seeing on your screen now. Kabaddi is a sport played between two teams in Punjab, where each player demonstrates their strength and smartness. Since Mithu was the #1 kabaddi player in his village, he was quite attractive and powerful. The rickshaw hadn't arrived at the stand yet, so Mithu and his friends were joking around. Suddenly, they noticed 3 women walking towards the rickshaw stand from the opposite road. As these 3 women approached, Mithu and his friends noticed that 2 of them were older, while the third one accompanying them was a very beautiful young girl. When the rickshaw arrived at the stand, all passengers got in, and the beautiful girl sat on the back seat while Mithu stood behind the rickshaw. During this journey, Mithu noticed that the girl kept looking at him repeatedly, and his friends also noticed this. However, Mithu couldn't talk to the girl. As soon as she arrived in her village, she got off the rickshaw with her family. Once again, she looked towards Mithu, and for the first time, their eyes met. Besides, she smiled when she looked at Mithu, and in response, Mithu also smiled. Then both of them went their separate ways. When Mithu started doing some other work after reaching home, he heard a girl's voice screaming, "Please help! I need help!" As soon as Mithu stepped out of the house, he saw that it was the same girl he had seen in the morning in the rickshaw and smiled at while she was leaving. After that, Mithu went to the girl, who had come on a scooter with her friend from her home. Here, Mithu first greeted the girl with a hi, and then tried to start the scooter but deliberately didn't start it. Then, Mithu asked the girl her name and also told her his name. Actually, the girl's name was Jaswinder Kaur, but her nickname was Jassie. After that, Mithu said to the girl, "I want to talk to you." Hearing this, Jassie got confused because she didn't understand Mithu's words. So, her friend, who came with her, translated Mithu's words into English for Jassie. Then, the girl said something in English, but Mithu didn't understand English, so Jassie's friend became a translator for Mithu here as well. After that, Jassie said, "We'll meet in Jagrayan village tomorrow." In fact, this village was about 15 to 20 minutes away from Mithu's house. When they met at that time, Mithu would be around 20 to 22 years old, while Jassie would be 19 to 20 years old. In addition, Mithu was born into a family that earned their living by farming, and he had only studied up to high school before choosing kabaddi as a career. Besides, he also drove a rickshaw in his free time. The next day, Mithu gets ready and reaches the village of Jagrayan. And then, after some time, Jassie also arrives there. For some time, they talk to each other. In the meantime, Jassie tells Mithu that she lives with her family in Canada and has come to spend the winter vacation at her maternal grandparents' house in India. Among the 2 women she was with yesterday, one was her mother named Maliat Kaur, while the other woman with her was Jassie's maternal uncle's wife, meaning Jassie's aunt. Apart from this, that day there was a little conversation between Jassie and Mithu, and then both went to their respective homes. But from that day on, these 2 meet regularly. Gradually, Mithu also realizes that Jassie's maternal grandparents' house is the wealthiest home in her neighboring village. Besides, Jassie's maternal home and Mithu's small 2-room house were on the border of 2 villages, meaning Mithu's house was right behind Jassie's maternal grandparents' house. And Mithu knows this fact. After this, Jassie and Mithu eloped on March 15, 1999, avoiding the scrutiny of their families, and got married in a Gurudwara, which is a place of worship for Sikhs. After the marriage, Jassie returns home as if everything is normal, and no one suspects anything. However, the relationship that Jassie's family had been considering for her breaks down for some reason. After staying in Punjab for 2 months and marrying Mithu, Jassie leaves for Canada with her family. But before leaving, she promises Mithu that she will come back soon. After going to Canada, Jassie and Mithu start talking to each other on the phone again, and by now, Mithu's house also had a telephone line installed. Months passed by in this way, but at the beginning of February, some relatives of Jassie who were in India come to know about Mithu and Jassie's marriage, and they immediately informed Jassie's parents in Canada. After this, their love story takes a sharp turn. From this point, Mithu's parents start pressuring him, while on the other hand, Jassie's mother and uncle begin pressuring her to break the marriage. However, neither Mithu agrees to it, nor does Jassie consent to breaking the marriage. Although Mithu is tempted by money, and Jassie is tempted by expensive things, cars, and the lure of a luxurious lifestyle, neither of them is willing to break the marriage. One day, Jassie's mother brought documents for Jassie to sign so that Mithu could come to Canada. Jassie signed them all, unaware that the documents claimed Mithu had forced her into marriage and assaulted her. Later, Jassie came to Canada with her family. In reality, after Jassie signs this document, her family members send it to the Punjab police in India. And based on it, an FIR, First Information Report, is registered against Mithu for abduction, forced marriage, illegal weapons possession, etc., and he is also arrested. After the arrest, Mithu is brutally beaten in jail and stays there for several months. Meanwhile, when Jassie fails to receive any response to Mithu's letters and is unable to contact him over the phone, she finally learns from a friend that Mithu had been jailed on charges of abduction, forced marriage, and other offenses. Here, Jassie discovers that her mother, Maliat Kaur, had deceived her by obtaining her signature and implicating Mithu, causing significant difficulties for his family and friends. Furthermore, the Punjab police have arrested Mithu's family members from his home and imprisoned them as well. Then, a few days later, Mithu talks to Jassie, where he says to her, "If you wanted to divorce Jassie, you could have just asked me. We got married with your consent, so why did you falsely accuse me?" After this, Jassie tells Mithu the whole story of how her mother and uncle got her to sign the wrong paper deceitfully. But now in Canada, Jassie was kept confined in her own home by her mother and uncle. Then, one day, Jassie gets an opportunity and successfully manages to come to India with the help of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP. She then comes to India and testifies in court that Mithu, his family, and his friends are all innocent. "I married Mithu of my own free will." After this statement, everyone, including Mithu, is released from jail. Then Jassie stays in India for some time. This time, Jassie tells Mithu that she will never go back to Canada again. It is said that along with the police, Jassie's father and brother also helped her escape from home. Jassie had come to India and started living with her husband, but both of them also knew that Jassie's family members would not remain silent. That's why, as soon as Jassie arrives in India, Mithu takes her away from home and they start living in hiding. Mithu took Jassie to her hometown in June 2000 while they were living at their home. Meanwhile, on June 12th, Mithu's family had organized a party in their village for Mithu and Jassie's wedding. So, on June 8th, Jassie tells Mithu that she wants to go shopping. Initially, Mithu refuses because he knew there was still danger, so leaving the house wasn't right. But then, when Jassie sits at home upset, Mithu also feels maybe he did wrong. Jassie left her home in Canada to be with him, and he couldn't even take her shopping. After that, they both leave for the market in the afternoon. It takes them a bit longer to return home. So, by the time they get back, it's already evening, and the sun has set. Because of this, Mithu's family starts worrying about both of them. A while later, Mithu's family begins searching for them. However, during the search, they receive devastating news that shakes Mithu's family to the core. They find out that Mithu is in a very serious condition, admitted to the hospital, while there's no trace of Jassie. When Mithu's family members rush to the hospital, they find out that Mithu's condition is extremely serious, and he is unconscious. Jassie is not there. Then, after several hours, when Mithu regains consciousness, he first inquires about Jassie. Only then do they inform Mithu about Jassie. A few days later, when Mithu recovers, he explains the reason behind his condition. Mithu says that after reaching the market, Jassie did a lot of shopping, and then they both also had coffee together. Later, as they started returning home from the market, their scooter stopped on its own 3 or 4 times. Twice, he sought help from a mechanic, and once he encountered his friend on the way. However, when the scooter started for the 3rd time, they noticed that they were being followed by 2 people on another scooter. After following the scooter riders for some time, they went ahead. But as soon as Mithu turned towards his village, he saw a car in front of him. At first, he saw from a distance that there was no one near the car. But as soon as he approached the car, suddenly, 5 to 6 men came out and stood in front of the scooter. One of them even attacked them, which caused blood to start oozing from Jassie's head. After that, Mithu held Jassie and started fighting back against those thugs. But then, one thug also attacked Mithu's head with a large rod from a nearby road. After that, Mithu became unconscious, and those thugs kept beating Mithu. Finally, thinking he was dead, they threw him into the nearby drain. A few hours later, late at night, some laborers passing by noticed Mithu lying there, and they picked him up and took him to the hospital. After learning this story, everyone sets out to find Jassie. This information is also given to the police, and now the police also begin to search for Jassie. After filing cases of assault and abduction against unknown criminals, the next day, on June 9th, Jassie is found, but she was not alive. In fact, Jassie had also been murdered and thrown into a canal, which was 45 kilometers away from her hometown. When Jassie's body is retrieved from there, it is discovered that someone had brutally strangled her to death. Additionally, Jassie's body bore dozens of deep wounds, indicating that she had been tortured cruelly before dying. When Jassie's body is found, the Punjab police also contacts Jassie's family. However, Jassie's mother, Maliat Kaur, and uncle, Surjit Singh, both deny recognizing the deceased as Jassie. But Mithu and his family, along with Jassie's father and brother, confirm that the body is indeed Jassie's. Now, the key question was, who had inflicted such a severe beating on Mithu, and who had brutally murdered Jassie? After Jassie's body was found, the charge of murder was added to the case, and the police embarked on the search for the criminals. During the search, the police managed to apprehend several major criminals in the vicinity based on suspicion. The police were so alert because although Jassie was Mithu's wife, she was actually a Canadian citizen. In the case of Jassie's death, suspicions quickly arose among certain individuals, and the police soon discovered who was involved in Jassie's murder. When the police rigorously interrogated these individuals, some criminals confessed to having committed Jassie's murder themselves and admitted to brutally beating Mithu as well. However, the question remains, who instigated all of this? During the investigation, when the names of certain individuals come up, nobody trusts anyone. Anil Kumar, a gangster involved in this incident, implicates Inspector Joginder Singh of the Punjab police, claiming that he had given him a contract to kill Mithu a few days earlier. Now, the police immediately start searching for Inspector Joginder Singh and manage to arrest him shortly after. When questioned by the police, Joginder Singh explains that he carried out the murder because he received a phone call from Darshan Singh, Jassie's other uncle who resides in Punjab. Darshan Singh promised him 3 lakh rupees to kill Mithu. Now, the police ask Anil Kumar why he killed Jassie when he was given the contract to kill Mithu. Upon revealing the truth, Anil Kumar and his accomplice leave everyone astonished. Anil Kumar explains that after beating Mithu, they thought he was dead, so they threw him into the nearby drain. Then, following Darshan Singh's orders, they took Jassie to an empty farmhouse. As soon as Jassie regains consciousness upon entering the farmhouse, she begins to search for Mithu. Upon inquiry, the goons inform her that Mithu is dead. Now, they start talking to Jassie's mother, Maliat Kaur, who tells them to wait for a moment, and she will tell them what to do next. After this, Jassie's uncle and her mother have a conversation. And afterward, they called the goons again and instruct them to beat up Jassie and threaten her, besides asking her to testify against Mithu and come back to Canada. Despite being beaten badly by the goons, Jassie still refuses to return to Canada and testify against Mithu. After this, the goons once again talk to Jassie's mother and tell her that Jassie is not willing to listen to them. After this, Jassie's mother tells the goons that if Jassie doesn't listen to anything, they can kill her too. Initially, the goons refused to do so because their deal was only to kill Mithu for 3 lakh rupees. But Jassie's uncle, Surjit Singh, says a separate 3 lakh rupees will be given to them for Jassie's murder. After that, the goons brutally beat Jassie, attacking her body with swords, knives, and pieces of glass. Jassie is tortured badly, and finally, one of the goons strangles her to death. Jassie dies, and her body is lifted and thrown into a distant canal. Following this revelation, 13 people, including Jassie's maternal uncle, Darshan Singh, who resides in India, are arrested in this murder case. They are charged with abduction and murder, among other offenses. Jassie's mother, Maliat Kaur, and her uncle, Surjit Singh, who live in Canada, are also considered prime suspects. Now, since the victim and the accused had relations in Canada as well, the trial of this case begins in both India and Canada. During the trial in India, it is proven that when Jassie refused to leave for Canada without Mithu, Jassie's mother Maliat Kaur and uncle Surjit Singh planned that if Mithu is killed, Jassie will surely come back. After this, Surjit Singh contacts his brother Darshan Singh in India and assigns him the task of getting Mithu killed. Afterward, he contacts Inspector Joginder Singh of the Punjab Police and seeks his assistance in this matter. Following this, Inspector Joginder Singh arranges a meeting between Darshan Singh and a contract killer named Anil Varma. Subsequently, Anil, along with his gang, executes this incident. After a lengthy trial on October 21, 2005, the Sungurur court sentences 11 out of 12 people as guilty. Among the convicted individuals are Jassie's other maternal uncle Darshan Singh, Police Inspector Joginder Singh, and contract killer Anil Varma. However, as time progresses, these individuals challenge the verdict of the lower court in the Punjab and Haryana High Court, where almost all the accused are granted bail one by one. In the end, only Jassie's other maternal uncle Darshan Singh, Inspector Joginder Singh, and contract killer Anil Kumar are deemed guilty and sentenced to imprisonment. However, all the convicted individuals challenged this decision of the High Court in the Supreme Court. Subsequently, proceedings begin here as well. And on April 16, 2015, Darshan Singh is acquitted and discharged. However, the rest of the defendants do not receive relief from here, and their sentence remains upheld. Apart from this, before delving into what happens in the courts of Canada, let's take a step back in the case. Due to being severely injured in the attack, Mithu remains hospitalized for a long time. While staying in the hospital, Jassie's final rites are also performed. However, as soon as Mithu recovers and returns home from the hospital, a series of 7 cases are filed against him one after another. There were some cases of illegal weapon possession with allegations of drug selling against Mithu, and pressure is also built by the police and Jassie's relatives to retract his statement and end the case. However, Mithu doesn't yield to anyone's persuasion and continues with the case. Meanwhile, in February 2004, a woman accused Mithu of rape. Upon these allegations, Mithu is immediately arrested and sentenced to Ludhiana Central Jail. Mithu stays in this jail for the next 4 years. But after 4 years, it is proven in court that the woman who accused Mithu of rape had connections with Jassie's maternal family, and she falsely accused Mithu for money. After this revelation, Mithu is released from jail after serving 4 years. However, despite this, there were still some cases pending against Mithu, and he continued to have dealings with the jail during this time. Besides Mithu, his brothers also faced different allegations, and behind these accusations was Jassie's uncle, Surjit Singh. When Mithu doesn't fear even fake cases and threats, around 2012, attempts are made to buy him off. In this case, Jassie's family offers Mithu 10 million rupees and a prime location of 14 acres of land to change their statement. However, Mithu remains steadfast and continues the fight for justice. Maliat Kaur and Surjit Singh, the main suspects residing in Canada, were extradited to India for the trial of Jassie's murder case, which began on January 6, 2012, in Canada. The police in Maple Ridge arrested Jassie's mother, Maliat Kaur, and her uncle, Surjit Singh, for conspiring against Jassie and arranging her murder. After 2 years, on September 9, 2014, the Supreme Court of British Columbia approves their extradition to India. Both suspects then appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, which stays the lower court's decision and starts a new trial. On September 8, 2017, the Supreme Court of Canada orders Maliat Kaur and Surjit Singh to be sent back to India to face the charges. After the decision of the Supreme Court of Canada, 3 police officers from Punjab immediately depart for Canada to take the accused into custody. However, in the meantime, the accused once again file a petition for review against the court's decision. As a result, the Punjab police have to return empty-handed. Although the review petition provided temporary relief for a few months, finally, on December 11, 2018, the Supreme Court of Canada rejects the review petition, leading to their definitive extradition to India. After the completion of legal formalities, both accused were repatriated to India by Canadian authorities on January 24, 2019. Upon arrival in Delhi, they were immediately arrested and transported to Punjab. They appeared in court the next day, granted a 4-day remand, then sent to Kapurthala jail as the trial commenced in Sangarur court. A total of 23 witnesses are presented by the Punjab police. And in addition to this, the call details of Jassie's mother and uncle are also submitted as evidence in court. From the call details, it is revealed that Jassie's mother and uncle had spoken on the phone a total of 266 times with the goons before and on the day of Jassie's murder. Mithu waits patiently while Jassie's family endures the prolonged delay of justice over the past 23 years. The Punjab police have received praise, but Mithu's quest for Jassie's justice remains unmet. On the February 27, 1974, Peter and Joan Lawrence welcomed their second child into the world, a little girl named Claudia. Peter Lawrence was a highly respected and successful solicitor, and the family lived comfortably in Yorkshire. Claudia was educated at the prestigious York College for Girls, and by all accounts had a very happy childhood. Although her parents would later divorce, Claudia remained close to both of them. She was sociable and friendly and had a great group of friends. As she got older, she discovered her passion for cooking, and after attending a local catering college, she quickly became a qualified chef. She worked in various restaurants and hotels in York, but soon grew tired of the unsociable hours and wanted a change. Claudia was a bubbly young woman who loved nothing more than being with family and friends, so she changed employment and began working at Goodricke College at the University of York. She was well-liked, and her employer described her as a reliable woman who was always on time. A year later, in February 2007, she settled into the area and bought a cottage about 3 miles away from Goodricke College. Life for Claudia was seemingly going well. Close to her house was the Nag's Head pub, and she was a regular there, becoming a well-liked patron of the business. Although she was close with her parents and older sister, Ally, she kept some aspects of her life hidden. She allegedly had a series of short-term relationships, but did not share this with people. Wednesday, March 18, 2009. Claudia clocked in at 6 a.m. to start her shift at work. Around 2 p.m., it was time for her to finish, and she was seen on CCTV leaving work on foot. Around an hour later, she was picked up again on CCTV, passing a shop close to where she'd lived, and she was also spotted by one of her neighbors. Shortly after this sighting, a colleague drove past her and offered her a lift home. The colleague dropped her off outside her door at 2:50 p.m. Throughout the evening, she caught up with her friends and parents over the phone. Her mother said that during their conversation, Claudia seemed like her usual self. She was chatty and relaxed. Mother's Day was coming up, and they discussed what they wanted to do to celebrate. Claudia told her mom that as her car was out of action and being repaired, she would need to be in bed early if she had to walk to work the next day. The following morning rolled around, and as it approached 6 a.m., the always punctual Claudia failed to turn up. Her manager knew this was out of character and called her mobile to check on her. Although her phone rang, it redirected to her voicemail. Her manager took no further action. Claudia also arranged to meet her friend Susie Cooper at the Nag's Head pub near her house that evening. Susie turned up, but Claudia did not. This was not like Claudia, and Susie tried to contact her. Claudia was often on her phone, a Samsung D900, and Susie became concerned when she heard nothing back from her. The following morning, Friday, March, Susie tried again, but she was met with no response. She decided to get in touch with Goodricke College to see if anyone had seen or heard from her. She was deeply worried when they discovered that Claudia had not been to work for the last 2 days. Susie contacted Claudia's father, Peter, that day to let him know that she hadn't been to work, and people couldn't get hold of her. Peter traveled to Claudia's home where he and Susie did a search of the house. Nothing was out of place, and nothing was disturbed. It looked like she had eaten breakfast as there were dishes in the sink, and her bed had been neatly made. Some recently used hair dye bottles and gloves were also found, but nothing of any real significance was there, and everything was where it should be. The only thing missing from the house was her mobile phone, a blue rucksack which she would usually take to work, and her hair straighteners. When considering everything, it appeared that Claudia had left to go to work as normal that Thursday morning, and something had happened on the way which meant she never made it there. At around 2 p.m. on Friday, March, the call was made to North Yorkshire Police to report Claudia as a missing person. Later that day, officers came to Claudia's house and met with her father. But as there were no signs of violence and she wasn't considered vulnerable, the police initially were not quick to act. The police believed that Claudia had probably chosen to go away for a few days and that she would come home soon. But just to be sure, they put out a request for the public's help and checked her usual route to work for any signs of her. But Claudia's family were adamant that she wouldn't leave without telling people. They argued it was more likely that she had been abducted. In the North Yorkshire area, around 3,500 people go missing each year. The vast majority eventually turn up after taking a few days or weeks away, and the police thought that this could have been what Claudia had done. But as time went on and no sign of her was found, and she hadn't contacted anyone, this was soon dismissed. The police had several theories about what could have potentially happened to Claudia. One theory was that she hadn't been met with foul play, but had had an accident or other medical incident on her way to work. This was soon ruled out by the police, however, as they thoroughly checked her routes and found no sign of her. Weeks would pass, and with no sign of Claudia, 5 weeks after she vanished, the police changed their inquiry. They said it had escalated from a missing persons case to a murder inquiry. Another theory was that Claudia had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time and fallen victim to a violent criminal or serial killer. But a conclusive result couldn't be drawn from investigating these claims, and cases of known serial killers who could have been in the area at the time were also looked into, but ultimately ruled out. Statistically, most murder victims are known to their killers. The theory that police soon made the top of their priority to investigate was that she had fallen victim to somebody she knew, with her different relationships making her potentially more vulnerable to an angry, jilted partner or something similar. The police checked the CCTV cameras following her route to work, but she wasn't found anywhere on the footage. As the case began to escalate, Crime Stoppers offered a reward of £10,000 for anyone with information that would lead to an arrest and conviction relating to Claudia Lawrence. The police received over 1,000 calls offering a plethora of information. A witness came forward to say they had seen whom they believed to be Claudia talking to a man on Melrose Gate Bridge at around 5:35 a.m. on the March 19th. The bridge was near to Claudia's home. He claimed that the man was smoking a cigarette in his left hand and had what they said was a skinny build. He was wearing a dark-colored hoodie with the hood up and dark-colored combat trousers. The woman with him was described as smaller than the man with mousy brown hair. She was wearing a blue waist-length jacket with buttons and pockets, but nothing really came of this, and to this day, the police are still following up leads for who they dubbed the left-handed smoker. The case brought the local community to a standstill, and people from all over the country were desperate for any news on the missing Claudia. One of the leading figures in the Anglican Church, the Archbishop of York, John Sentamu, made an appeal for anyone with information to come forward to the police. In June 2009, Crime Watch featured a reconstruction of Claudia's last known movements in a bid to generate more information. Later that month, her father, Peter, launched a YouTube appeal to try and help find his missing daughter. The annual Whitby Regatta was also used to drum up publicity in the search for Claudia Lawrence. Claudia was an avid user of her mobile phone, so this became a key piece of evidence for the police to investigate. Her phone records show that in the weeks leading up to her going missing, she had spent a lot of time in the Acrib area of Yorkshire. Claudia's phone was still on until just after midday on Thursday the 19th. It was then deliberately switched off. Cell phone tower data indicated that her phone had not left the local area during the time it was on. After examining the records further, they found that on the March 18th, a day before she went missing, she received a text message at 8:30, which she replied to. But just 45 minutes later at 9:15, she got another text, which she did not respond to. It was reported that the last text Claudia received was from a man who lived in Cyprus. Following on from the text message she received in February, the police revealed that they had extended their search to Cyprus. She had holidayed there several times, and it was also believed that she had looked for job opportunities there too. The man in charge of the investigation, Detective Superintendent Ray Galloway, said she knew several people who lived there and had received different job offers while visiting. He said that some of the people who had been spoken to were reluctant to offer information. Several months would pass with still no sign of Claudia Lawrence. Christmas and New Year's came and went, and her family faced their first painful holiday without their beloved daughter and sister. In March the following year, the police began searching Heslington and York based on information they'd received in the previous few days. On the 24th of that month, a muddy track near a play park was searched, and the next day, the search was moved to a field near the University of York. These searches, however, would turn up nothing. It was later considered that the search had been prompted by somebody providing false information. Detective Superintendent Galloway said that Claudia's relationships and love life could provide an explanation into her going missing. A journalist for Sky TV stated this was the only missing persons case they had covered where they had been threatened and warned to stay away, not once, but twice. After an extensive initial investigation, the most likely theory police believed probable was that Claudia had left for work that morning, and that she had been abducted and murdered by a local man she knew. For years would pass, and Claudia's family was still no closer to finding out what had happened to her. In June 2013, the North Yorkshire Police announced that they had formed a new major crime unit, costing £300,000. In October of that year, they revealed they were opening several cold cases, one of which was Claudia Lawrence. The squad at the Major Crimes Unit re-examined the case and also conducted new forensic searches of her house. Science had moved on since the initial investigation, which allowed for more advanced techniques to be used. During these further tests, they found male DNA on a cigarette butt in her car. 5 years to the day after her disappearance, Crime Watch aired CCTV that had been discovered back in February 2009. It showed a silver Ford Focus hatchback driving along the road she'd lived on. The CCTV showed that as the car approached Claudia's house, the brake lights came on. Another vehicle that the police wanted to track down was a white Vauxhall Astra van that had been picked up on a bus's camera. It was parked on the opposite side of the road across from Claudia's house, and was there for at least 30 minutes around 9 p.m. on Wednesday, March. Before long, the case would take a surprising turn. D. Mallon was now heading the investigation, and several arrests were promptly made. All the men arrested were believed to have either had relationships with Claudia or had insight into said relationships. In May 2014, the police arrested a 59-year-old man on suspicion of murdering Claudia Lawrence. But in November, he was released from bail without charge. In July 2014, another arrest was made. Paul Harris was the landlord of the Cone Pub and was arrested on suspicion of perverting the course of justice, but he too was released without charge. He explained that his only connection to Claudia had been that she had had a drink in his pub in the weeks leading up to her going missing, and apart from that, he had no relationship with her. On the 6th anniversary of her disappearance, police released CCTV that was spread through the media like wildfire. At 7:15 p.m. on the March 18th, just a day before she was considered missing, cameras near her home picked up some interesting footage. The footage shows an area near an alleyway at the back of Claudia's house. A person is seen walking towards the alley. Just over a minute later, they walk back out. Someone else is crossing the road ahead, and the person walking pauses to let them pass. The footage unsettled many, and the police urged the public to help find who these two people were. On the same CCTV camera around 10 hours later at 5:07 a.m., someone is spotted again walking backwards and forwards from the same alley behind Claudia's house. The police wondered if this was the same person, and what, if any, relevance this bore to the disappearance of Claudia. If it was of any relevance, this could have been linked to the witness that claimed to see someone they thought may have been Claudia talking to a male that was smoking on Melrose Gate Bridge. The timing was just 20 minutes apart and in the same location by her house. In February 2016, the North Yorkshire Police took the case to the Crown Prosecution Service, asking that 4 men be charged and put on trial for the murder of Claudia Lawrence. The Crown Prosecution Service refused, saying there was a lack of sufficient evidence. The four men had drank at the Nag's Head pub, but denied being involved in Claudia going missing. The police said that witnesses had refused to cooperate, and the second investigation was ended soon after. Stephen Fulcher was the senior investigating officer into the crimes committed by notorious murderer Christopher Hollowell. In his book detailing his work on that case, he noted the similarities between Claudia's case and that of Sarno Callahan, who was murdered by Hollowell in February 2011. He was also convicted of the murder of Becky Gooden in February 2016. Christopher Hollowell was interviewed about Claudia in prison, and flatly denied he had played any part in her disappearance and possible murder. The witness's account of seeing a skinny male smoking a cigarette with his left hand on Melrose Gate Bridge fit the physical description of Hollowell. Despite many people's theories surrounding Hollowell's possible involvement in the case, both North Yorkshire Police and Wiltshire Police have said there is no evidence to link Hollowell to the disappearance of Claudia Lawrence. Questions surrounding how the initial investigation was handled were asked, and people wanted to know why things hadn't moved quickly enough. After Claudia's disappearance, her father began a tireless campaign for a change in the law. In February, Claudia's law was passed which allowed for a guardian to be appointed if a person had been missing for more than 90 days. It meant direct debits could be stopped and financial affairs managed in their absence. Tragically, less than 2 years later, her father Peter died in February 2021 without ever finding out what had happened to his missing daughter. Friends and family remain hopeful that they will one day be able to answer the question, what happened to Claudia Lawrence? Peter Lawrence, Claudia's father, set up a website with all the relevant links and contact information, should you wish to leave a tip of any kind about Claudia's case. I've left a link to that in the description along with some of the sites you can visit to help keep Claudia's case as active as possible. Jamie Hahn was born on October 25, 1983. Growing up in Orangeburg, South Carolina, she lived with her two brothers and sister, Brett, Justin, and Ashley. Despite their parents' divorce and remarriage, Jamie remained a cheerful child. She attended a small yet renowned private prep school celebrated for its educational excellence. In junior high, Jamie visited the University of North Carolina with her classmates. She instantly fell in love with the campus and aspired to attend. Even as a student, she aimed to impact others' lives by joining the board of the Center of Hope to support troubled teens. Later on, Jamie engaged in various political campaigns. One notable campaign was Senator John Edwards' 2008 presidential run, a competitor to Obama. During this campaign, Jamie emerged as a prominent figure in North Carolina's Democratic Party. During one campaign, she met Nation and formed a deep professional relationship with him that later evolved from platonic to romantic. For months after their romantic moment, they announced their engagement and married on April 18, 2009. Their intense love was anchored in a deep friendship. Jamie and Nation thrived in their respective careers. Jamie ran her own political fundraising consulting firm, while Nation was a well-known online strategist, aiding politicians and nonprofits with their campaigns. Described by friends and acquaintances as exceptionally kind, tender, and generous, the couple was well regarded. They took their marriage vows seriously and actively participated in projects like the Coalition to Protect Young Families in North Carolina. Although they were childless at that time, Jamie and Nation planned on starting a family soon. They both enjoyed vibrant social lives. Jamie was known among her friends and family as a compassionate individual who had the ability to spread happiness wherever she went. Her talent and enthusiasm for politics led many to foresee a promising future for her. However, unexpectedly, their seemingly perfect world suddenly fell apart on April 22, 2013. Around 5:20 p.m., Jamie frantically ran from her house and sprinted a few dozen meters before collapsing unconscious in a neighbor's yard. Her body was drenched in blood. Onlookers on the street were shocked by the scene and shouted for someone to call 911. A neighbor, who saw the turmoil unfolding in his yard, immediately phoned emergency services. Through Jameen's disoriented words, he understood that someone named John, who seemed to still be inside her house, had assaulted her with a knife. He quickly applied a towel to the numerous wounds on her abdomen and urgently summoned an ambulance and the police. Arriving patrol officers traced the blood from the neighbor's yard back to the Han residence. Encircling the house, they commanded the individual inside to exit with hands raised. Moments later, a disheveled bald man emerged on the porch. The officers noted he bore wrist injuries and a stab wound in his abdomen. Due to his injuries, this unidentified man was transported to the hospital in an ambulance, escorted by a police officer. En route to the hospital, the wounded man grew distressed and tearful, expressing regret that this hadn't occurred sooner, and repeatedly murmuring a desire to die. Following his medical treatment, the police endeavored to ascertain his identity, reasons for being in the Han residence, and circumstances leading to this tragic event. They soon discovered he was 31-year-old Jonathan Wayne Brill, a close friend of Nation and a guest in their home. Jameen also knew John well. She had employed him as an accountant in her political consulting firm after he relocated to North Carolina. The couple had generously offered him accommodation in their home until he could find his own place. Nation and John hailed from the same hometown and crossed paths in 2000 during a church trip. Despite a 4-year age gap, they quickly struck up a friendship. As it often happens with childhood friends, they drifted apart when one went off to college, but rekindled their bond post-graduation. They became virtually inseparable. Jonathan even had the honor of being the best man at Nation and Jamine's wedding. In April 2009, the trio was akin to the Three Musketeers, following the ethos of one for all and all for one. They shared vacations, regular Monday dinners, and celebrated holidays together. To some neighbors, Jonathan seemed almost like an extension of the Han family, given how much time he spent at their home. This deep, seemingly unbreakable bond makes the violent incident that left all three with stab wounds in their own home all the more perplexing and tragic. Every Monday, Jamie and Nation would host their mutual friend Jonathan for dinner. On that particular day, Broyhill arrived earlier than usual with the intention of discussing recent campaign details with Jamie. The friends were deeply concerned about John's well-being as he had confided in them about his diagnosis of pancreatic cancer, a notably aggressive and often terminal disease. The Hans, in their caring nature, accompanied Jonathan to his medical appointments and were consistently present, offering every possible support in his arduous battle for life. There was an instance when Jamie, overwhelmed with emotion, asked Nation if they should consider having a child soon so that their future offspring might have the chance to know Jonathan. Such was their affection and regard for their friend. They wished even their yet-to-be-born child could have the opportunity to bond with him. The recent diagnosis of cancer was a harsh blow, but it wasn't the health challenge Brill had encountered. Over the years, John had experienced multiple hospitalizations. He had once revealed to Nation that he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis during a gallbladder operation. Consequently, the Hans invited Jonathan to live with them temporarily, offering care and support until his health improved. On that fateful Monday, Jamie and Jonathan were already engaged in work-related discussions in the kitchen when Nation arrived home and headed upstairs to change. Nation was startled by Jamie's screams calling out his, and then John's name. Assuming that Brill may have fallen ill given his medical condition, Nation hurried downstairs midway. He was met with Jameen's terror-stricken voice, crying out that someone was trying to stab her. Rushing into the kitchen, Nation was confronted with the horrifying sight of his wife on the floor, bleeding profusely. John stood over her, wielding a large kitchen knife. As Brill and started advancing towards Nation, knife raised threateningly. Nation froze in disbelief. How could such a nightmare unfold in mere minutes? In a desperate act of self-defense, Nation grabbed the knife blade with one hand, while striking John in the face with his other hand. Amidst this chaos, he frantically urged Jermaine to run for safety. Attempting to subdue a man who until moments ago was his closest friend seemed almost unreal. Despite her grave injuries, Jermaine miraculously managed to rise from the floor and flee through the side door of their home. Once she was out, Nation, overcoming shock and tumult, pushed Jonathan aside and hurried after his wife. Outside, Jamine desperately made her way to the nearest neighbor's house for help. Unfortunately, no one responded to her urgent knocking. Summoning her remaining strength, she attempted to reach the next house, but collapsed unconscious in their yard due to her overwhelming injuries. Alerted by the commotion and drawn by the screams, passers-by quickly came to her assistance, while a neighbor called for an ambulance and the police. Meanwhile, Nation, panicked, searched frantically for Jassie. Following the trail of blood led him to discover her in a neighbor's yard. She was conscious, but in agony, clutching her side. Kneeling beside her, he took her hand and tried comforting her with promises of recovery and future anniversaries and vacations by the sea, though tears streamed down his face. As he spoke, clutching Jassie's hand, Nation was overwhelmed by thoughts of a life without her, and unable to fathom how their peaceful life had taken such a sudden turn. As they awaited help, a neighbor swiftly brought a towel to press against Jassie's bleeding abdomen. Unfortunately, the towel was quickly soaked with blood. Another compassionate neighbor elevated Jassie's legs onto a bag of leaves, trying to give some comfort. The ambulance was on its way, but to the onlookers the wait felt endless. Even though it was only a few minutes, Jassie's breathing grew labored, a clear sign of her critical state. When the paramedics arrived, they promptly administered life-saving measures. Nation, having suffered severe cuts to his hand while wrestling with the knife, also desperately needed medical attention. Both he and Jassie were rushed to the hospital. During transport, Jassie lost consciousness, and upon arrival was taken immediately for emergency surgery. Meanwhile, Nation, overwhelmed with worry for his wife and oblivious to his own pain, received stitches. He was in such shock that he repeatedly tried to enter the ICU, desperate for any updates about Jassie, but was denied access. Seated anxiously on a hospital bed, Nation was tormented by thoughts of Jassie's condition. Over a dozen stab wounds, a severed artery, and severe liver damage. His only solace during those excruciating moments was hoping and praying for her survival. By some miracle, Jassie did survive the surgery initially, but tragically, this hope was short-lived. She never regained consciousness. 2 days after this harrowing ordeal, Germaine succumbed to her injuries. The autopsy revealed a grim reality. She had sustained 24 stab wounds across various parts of her body, including her face, neck, back, hands, and forearms. However, the most lethal injuries were inflicted on her abdomen and chest, resulting in catastrophic damage to her lungs and liver. Meanwhile, Jonathan Brill had inflicted wounds upon himself and was hospitalized for 8 days to recover from his self-inflicted injuries. On Tuesday, April 30th, 2013, still needing medical attention with bandages on both wrists, Brill was transported on a stretcher to the magistrate's office in Wake County. The individual was formally charged with degree murder in the case Jassie Han and assault with a deadly weapon on Nation Han. Due to the severity of the charges, he was held without bail and at Central Prison in Raleigh. This facility was specifically chosen because it housed a hospital wing, ensuring that Bree Hill would continue to receive the necessary medical treatment while in custody for his crimes. The tragic and sudden loss of Jassie profoundly impacted many, leaving a lingering question. Why would someone she considered a best friend commit such a horrific act, robbing her of her future? In the wake of the tragedy, speculation swirled within the community about a substantial amount of money that had gone missing during the election campaign, managed by Germaine's team. Jonathan Brill, who had served as the accountant, officially ceased working for the company at the end of 2012. Despite this, he remained responsible for providing Germaine with financial details and assisting in the preparation of financial reports. It was suspected that Jassie might have discovered the missing funds, which totaled over $50,000, and confronted Jonathan about this discrepancy. This confrontation could have triggered his violent outburst. On April 22, 2013, Jassie had invited Jonathan over for their regular Monday dinner and intended to discuss the company's financial issues. The exact sequence of events during Nation's brief absence remains unclear. However, it is widely believed that Jassie might have challenged Jonathan regarding the missing funds during this time. As time passed, Nation's physical wounds began to heal, but emotional and psychological scars remained deep and unhealing. 6 months following this devastating event, Jassie's family and Nation's, her grieving husband, scattered her ashes near Pulaski Memorial Baptist Church. This place was significant because Jassie had dedicated her time and efforts as a volunteer there. In a poignant twist of fate, just a week before the tragedy, the Hans had requested the church's pastor to pray for Jonathan, who they believed was battling cancer. Did they know that soon it would be they who needed the prayers of their community in the wake of such an unimaginable loss? The nation had to grapple with the truth that an individual he had known from childhood, whom he saw as his dearest friend, had completely shattered his life, and even more heartbreakingly, claimed the life of the woman he adored more than anything in the world. According to Nation, Jassie was his anchor, his backbone, and his soulmate. He couldn't fathom how the sun could continue to glow without her. The trial of Brill commenced on March 4, 2015. The district attorney informed the jury that Jonathan, serving as Jenny's financial manager, had written 39 checks to himself, misappropriating around $50,000, the identical sum missing from the account. To rationalize his deeds, Brielle claimed various health issues including brain impairment from multiple sclerosis, memory deficits, a gallbladder operation, and pancreatic cancer. Compassionate Jamie refrained from confronting John about such a sensitive matter during his challenging times. She tactfully sidestepped the issue, hoping Brill would identify and rectify the mistake. All seemed normal until she got a call from a debt collector. Then the district attorney unveiled a startling truth. The preceding year, the defendant's hospitalization occurred when he was admitted following an episode at Hans's residence. Prior to that, Jonathan hadn't sought any medical treatment, as his health records confirmed. All along he had deceived Jamie and Nation about his health conditions. No gallbladder operation, no multiple sclerosis, and no cancer, but merely a manifest mental disorder and something dreadful. Within the search history revealed that the man had been seeking information on pancreatic cancer and specialists in this particular field, evidently to lend credibility to his falsehoods. He also looked up cruises that could be taken without a passport. John had arranged a one-way journey to Las Vegas for April 23rd, but canceled it on the 22nd, merely 2 hours before assaulting Jamie with a knife. Jonathan admitted to the authorities that he had indeed misappropriated the campaign funds and fabricated all his medical conditions. When the Hans escorted him to medical appointments, waiting in the car as devoted, caring friends, he merely roamed the hospital halls. In recent times, Jonathan grappled with depression and suicidal inclinations. He confessed to being tormented by voices urging him to harm others. He purchased the knife for himself, supposedly planning to use it in Vegas to end his life. Yet, he believed Jassie would confront him about the financial irregularities. When she did, he began to inflict wounds on himself. Jassie attempted to intervene, but at that point, he was so deranged and furious that he started assaulting his friend impulsively. Jonathan recalled attacking Jamie, yet parts of this episode were wiped from his memory. His lawyer and Jonathan himself realized that fully dismissing the charges was unfeasible due to the overwhelming evidence of his guilt. Still, they aimed to argue for temporary insanity to lessen the sentence. Before the jury retired to deliberate, Nation Han was allowed to speak. With a voice filled with sorrow, he expressed, "We lock our doors at night to block out the world's evil, but it's chilling to think what occurs when evil holds the key." He addressed these words to his former best friend. On March 19, 2015, the jury announced their decision. They ruled Jonathan Brill guilty of degree murder of Jamie Han and the attempted murder of Nation Han. The judge issued a life sentence without parole. Jassie's intentions were utterly pure, and her death was so senseless that even Jonathan later acknowledged in an interview that if he had been honest with the Hans, she would have forgiven him. Suddenly, their closest friend became their worst fear. This story defies any rational explanation. Phoenix Lucille Caldon was born Phoenix Reeves on May 23, 1988 to parents Goldia and Lawrence. Her father Lawrence adopted her soon after she was born, and her name was changed to Caldon. She was born in California, but the family moved to an area of Spanish for Lawrence's job. She was an only child. Inquisitive, bright, and creative, Phoenix showed incredible talent and promise from a young age. The Coldens were a deeply spiritual and religious family, and Phoenix would attend church regularly, and she was also in the choir. Friends of Phoenix said she led a very disciplined life, and that her parents, although were loving and supportive, were also very strict with high expectations. Friends claimed that Phoenix had expressed a desire to break away from her sheltered life and experience everything that came with school and college. She'd been mostly homeschooled from the 6th grade. She worked hard at all her studies and was a very high achiever. Her main passion, however, appeared to be music, where she excelled, playing violin and piano. She was also a regional junior fencing champion. In February 2007, she enrolled at the University of Missouri, and by this point had already moved out of the family home and into an apartment. Her parents signed the lease believing she was moving in with a friend. Her parents also said that it was around this time that Phoenix started acting differently and began arguing with them frequently. However, this was a big change for Phoenix. She had gone from a relatively sheltered upbringing to a completely new and open world at university, which may have caused some tensions between her and her parents. What her parents didn't realize, however, was that Phoenix was in a relationship with someone named Michael B., and she was actually living in the apartment with him. Her mother said that although she visited the apartment regularly, there was nothing to indicate she had a secret live-in boyfriend. Her friends speculated she may have felt this was the only way she could see Michael B., and she had to keep it a total secret. When Goldia found out about the relationship, she said that Michael B. was not someone she would have approved of her daughter dating. Phoenix began to miss her college classes, which culminated in her failing to register for her fall semester, another fact her parents and friends would not find out about for a long time. During the early months of February 2011, it is said that Phoenix began taking money from the family safe. The money was in saving bonds, and although it was Phoenix's money, it was in her mother's name. A total of around $2,500 was taken, and where the money ended up remains a mystery. In February, she moved back into the family home. Her mother said this was purely down to finances. Phoenix was able to study at university and stay at home, and this was far more cost-effective than her parents paying out for an apartment. Little did Goldia know, but Phoenix was not attending university at this time. When she returned from college, everyone who knew Phoenix described her as a totally different person. Her friends said that she had started experimenting with drugs, arguing with her parents more, and pushing people away. Her best friend and neighbor Akira commented that she wasn't the friend she once knew. She said she seemed paranoid, irritable, and erratic, and she was convinced that she was being followed. During a brief and trivial argument with Akira, Phoenix pulled a knife and brandished it at her. She kept this 10-inch blade down the side of her car door with no explanation as to why. Although the pair would move past the fights, Akira could tell that something was very wrong, and no one could seemingly get to the bottom of it. Phoenix would often sit in her car for long periods of time, spending hours on her phone, and her mother began to wonder why she needed even more privacy than that of her own room in her own house. It was later discovered that Phoenix had 2 phones. One was on a family plan, and one she was seemingly paying for herself. It seemed that Phoenix's life was far more complex and complicated than anyone had realized. December 18, 2011 would start as any other day in the Colton household. Phoenix and her mom attended the Sunday church service at 11 a.m., where Phoenix played in the bell choir. Fellow churchgoers and her pastor said nothing seemed off or amiss with Phoenix that day. Phoenix and her mom traveled back in Phoenix's car, briefly stopping at a convenience store on the way. During the car journey, Phoenix said to her mother that she wanted things to get back to how they had used to be. Goldia seemed hopeful that this would be a step forward in their relationship. They returned to the house at around 2 p.m. Phoenix changed into some sweatpants and a hoodie and went outside to play basketball. Just after 3 p.m., Phoenix grabbed her phone, passed her father, who had just returned from work without engaging in conversation, and got into her 1998 Chevy Blazer and pulled away from the house. Assuming she was going shopping or visiting friends, Lawrence didn't think anything of this. But sadly, this would be the last time he would ever see his daughter, and that is where the December 18th takes a sinister turn. Phoenix always stuck to her parents' curfew of 1 a.m. and had never stayed away from the house all night. And when she still wasn't home the following morning, Goldie knew in her gut that something serious had happened to her child. When she phoned the St. Louis County Police Department to report her daughter as missing, she was met with a lot of pushback. The officer who took the call told Goldie that Phoenix was a 23-year-old woman and was old enough to make her own decisions about where she went. But Goldie knew despite this was simply not in her daughter's nature, and her age was irrelevant. The officer ran Phoenix's car number plate through the system and said it hadn't turned up anything. Goldie and Lawrence were now frantic with worry, so decided to take matters into their own hands. They phoned around the hospitals to see if anyone fitting her description had been admitted and began circulating flyers. They contacted various television networks begging for her case to be circulated, but the networks failed to pick up the case. No one was following up on the case or reporting on it, and the Calden family felt ignored and let down. Valuable time was being lost, and Phoenix's family were working incredibly hard to keep the case in people's minds, trying to make up for the lack of coverage and interest in it. About 2 weeks later, her parents finally located her car. It was sitting impounded in a tow yard, having been there since the day she disappeared. The car was discovered just a 25-minute drive away from her home at 5:30 p.m. This was around 3 hours after Phoenix had left her house. The car had been impounded less than an hour after it was found. In February 2018, the network Oxygen looked into Phoenix Calden's case. Investigative reporter Chandria Thomas and retired police chief Joseph Delia headed the investigation and began uncovering more information. Chandria Thomas was actually a huge reason that Phoenix's case was brought to the media's attention, and she fought hard to keep it there too. Joe and Chandria looked into the state of Phoenix's car was found in. There have been many convicting stories surrounding the car since the start of the search for Phoenix. It was originally reported to have been found on the side of the road. The engine was still running, the keys were in the ignition, and the driver's side door was open. Phoenix's shoes and purse were also in the car. Chandria and Joe met with Officer Perry, who initially found the car and told them that the doors were closed. No key was in the ignition, and apart from a few random miscellaneous items, there had been nothing of interest inside the vehicle. He said it looked like the car had simply been pulled over and parked, almost as if someone had run out of fuel. When Officer Perry ran the license plate through the system, it did not flag up as stolen or suspicious, and thus it was towed off. The reason this may not have flagged up was that the car was now in a different area that had a separate police department, meaning any connections to the missing Phoenix in Spanish Lake would likely not have been made. At the time the car was found, Phoenix was not yet listed as a missing person either. One thing that was determined about the car was that the only DNA found inside belonged to Phoenix and her parents. The location of her car rang alarm bells with Goldie. It was in a derelict, run-down, and dangerous area of East St. Louis, known for crime and drugs, and her mother said she would have had no business being in that part of town. Had the car been stolen, driven there, and dumped? Had she driven it there herself and left it? Or had she been snatched from inside the car? More evidence was garnered from the 2018 review of the case regarding her phone records. On the December 17th, just a day before she was last seen, she made a total of 10 phone calls to her secret boyfriend, Michael B., using the phone on her family plan. That final call was 116 minutes long. On the December 18th, 2011, phone records again showed that the last person she spoke to using the phone on her family plan was again Michael B. This call was made at 1:46 p.m. and lasted just 1 minute. It appeared from looking at the phone records that this was the last call Phoenix ever made from that phone. Although officers said they were keeping any further information about the phone records and coordinates of the phone close to their chest, while the case is still being investigated. Although people initially reported that Phoenix's boyfriend, Michael B., had been evasive, the investigating officers reported he was actually very cooperative, and they were confident that he was in no way involved in Phoenix's disappearance. A theory that was presented early on, one that remains a theory to this day, was that she had potentially been taken by a human trafficking gang. The St. Louis area remains one of the top areas in the country for human trafficking, and this fact couldn't be overlooked. The highway close to where her car had been found, Interstate 70, is referred to as the trafficking highway. This theory was further fueled when a picture of her allegedly began circulating on a sex website. But it is believed that this was most likely nothing more than a nasty hoax. Another common thought was that the pressure in Phoenix's life had resulted in her wanting to start afresh and leave everything behind. Her best friend, Akira, said that Phoenix had told her she'd wanted to pack her things and leave. But to where? Phoenix never said. The theory that she may have ran away has always been disputed by her family. Akira would also claim that Phoenix was secretly seeing another man alongside Michael B. His name was also Mike, and he was referred to as Cell Phone Mike. Akira believed this new relationship was most likely the reason for the second phone. One of Cell Phone Mike's ex-girlfriends was interviewed, and she said that Mike had been violent with her during their relationship, resulting in her filing a restraining order against him. She alleged that Mike had taken an interest in Phoenix's case and would often look it up online. When she asked him about Phoenix, he replied, "Why are you worrying about someone who's dead?" It remains unknown if he had any involvement in Phoenix Colden's disappearance, or if he was just making a speculative, albeit crass, comment. In a now infamous and haunting video, Phoenix films herself as she sits in the car. The full video has never been released, but Chandria Thomas and Joe Delia looked into it closely during their investigation. They took the video to an audio engineer to get a full and clear understanding of what it was Phoenix had said. She asks God to help her accept the things she cannot change and says, "I probably would have been in a better situation if I would have just stuck with how I used to be." She goes on to say, "The only person that won't let me down is me." She is clearly very emotional and distressed, and it was evident that Phoenix was struggling deeply with something. The video was recorded just 1 month before she disappeared. In March 2014, a reported sighting of Phoenix came in. One of Phoenix's friends from church was getting ready to fly back from Vegas, and all the passengers were boarding the plane. As she sat down, she says Phoenix walked past her in the aisle with a group of women and 2 older men. Her friend said she called out her name, and the lady turned around and looked at her. She said, "Sorry, do I look like someone?" and carried on walking. Her friend noted that the women all looked similar to Phoenix, and the men appeared to be around 10 years older than the women. When she got off the plane, she ran straight to the service desk and reported that she had seen a missing person. Although the police quickly began searching the area, no trace of the woman in question was ever found. Her friend said on a scale of 1 to 10 of how confident she was that it was Phoenix Coldham, she was a definite 9. Many tips came in that would lead the family and police nowhere. Everything from fake phone calls with people pretending to be the missing Phoenix, to tip-offs claiming that Phoenix was involved in a cult and couldn't escape. But one tip in particular would cost the Coldens dearly. A man provided seemingly credible information about Phoenix's whereabouts, and Goldner and Lawrence spent their remaining savings on a private investigator to follow up on this lead. The lead turned out to be nothing more than a cruel hoax. Goldia and Lawrence had reached their financial limit and were forced to make a quick sale on their home. They had to move out of the area and the family home that they had loved so much. During the 2018 look into Phoenix's case, Chandria Thomas and Joe Delia found that Phoenix had 2 birth certificates, one under Phoenix Colden and one under Phoenix Reeves. A private investigator looked into the certificate under the name of Reeves and found that there was actually a Phoenix Reeves. This Phoenix Reeves had no social security number and no associated birth date. The only thing that linked with that name was an address that was listed as being occupied between the dates of January 2012 and June 2012. Before January 2012, this Phoenix Reeves did not exist, and this person would cease to exist after June of that year. The person living in the house at the time of the 2018 investigation said she had been the sole occupier of that house since February 2002, and no one by the name of Phoenix had ever lived there. Although eerie and a most definitely interesting lead, it appeared that this was nothing more than a strange coincidence. One thing that is for certain is that since Phoenix disappeared, no money has been taken from her bank accounts. No forms of identification have been renewed, and her digital footprint is non-existent. Everything seemed to stop on December 18, 2011. Therefore, the possibility of this case ultimately being a homicide has never been ruled out. What happened to 23-year-old Phoenix Colden on December 18, 2011 remains a total mystery, and no trace of her has ever been found. Was she abducted on December 18th? Did she leave of her own accord to start a new life? It is still an ongoing case, and her family and friends continuously pray and hope for answers. Her parents believe that she is still alive and being held somewhere against her will. They have never given up hope that she will one day come home. If you have any information relating to the disappearance or whereabouts of Phoenix Colden, please contact the Spanish Lake Police Department. Milford is a charming coastal city located in Connecticut, United States. Situated on the Long Island Sound, it offers picturesque views and a vibrant community. Covering an area of just over 25 square miles, it has a population of over 50,000 people. Known for its beautiful beaches, Milford attracts visitors and residents alike who appreciate its scenic landscapes and waterfront activities. The city boasts a rich history dating back to colonial times, with a blend of historic architecture and modern amenities. The people of Milford would never know that a tragedy was about to befall there in 2022. But first, let's uncover the layers of her past. Julie Monig entered the world on July 19, 1982 in the charming town of Goshen, New York. She was blessed with loving parents, Gerald J. Monig and Sandra Barish Doper, who nourished her alongside her two siblings, sister Allison Barati Corcoran and brother Peter Gerald Monig. Growing up, Julie thrived academically, attending the esteemed Monroe Woodbury schools and later graduating from Monroe Woodbury High School. She further pursued her education at Orange County Community College, expanding her knowledge and embracing new experiences along the way. After college, Julie Mono became a devoted medical assistant at Connecticut Coastal Obstetrics Gynecology and found joy in various aspects of her life. She embraced an active lifestyle, which was regularly engaging in running and walking to keep herself energized. However, her true passion lay in being a mother to her two sons, Nicholas Keith Turner and Sean Michael Turner. The details about her marriage and husband are unknown at this point. Julie's dedication and love as a single mother were remarkable, shaping the strong bond shared among them. Julie Minogue found love once again in 2017 and got into a relationship with a man from Roxbury named Ewan Anthony DeWitt. Together, they welcomed a son in 2019 named Luke Anthony Minogue into their lives. However, as time passed, difficulties arose in their relationship, which led Julie Salem walk in Milford, and their well-being remained her top priority. In 2022, Nicholas, the eldest son, was 21 years old and had bravely served his country in the Coast Guard, while Sean, at 17 years old, was a vibrant young man and was thriving as a high school senior. Her son with Ewan, Luke, was 3 and a bright light in their household. Julie herself was 40, and all seemed well for her and her 3 boys. But tragedy was waiting just around the corner. Late at night on December 6, 2022, 17-year-old Nicholas Minogue was startled awake by chilling screams. He didn't wake up at the first noise, and he dismissed it thinking that it could just be echoes from the neighborhood. But the cries were growing louder and more urgent, and he realized something was terribly wrong. Concerned about his mother's safety, Nicholas rushed down the stairs. As he descended, amidst the darkness, he caught a glimpse of a chilling scene. A man wielding an axe and his mother lying on the floor, her body drenched in blood. In the midst of the chaos, Nicholas heard the haunting words, "You didn't believe me," ringing in his ears. In a panic, the teenager raced upstairs and swiftly locked the door, determined to keep himself safe. He dialed 911 and urgently reported the horrifying scene which had unfolded before him. Determined to provide an extra layer of protection, he quickly placed a sturdy chair behind the locked door. With his heart pounding, he opened his window, desperately reaching out for help. Within minutes, police officers arrived and entered the house, but the teenager, gripped by fear, leaped out of the window. That's when he heard Milford PD shouts and realized it was not the intruder. Eventually, the authorities found the courageous teen and ensured his safety. In a devastating discovery, the police entered the kitchen to find Julie Minogue lying in a pool of blood on the floor. Her face and skull had been injured by multiple deep cuts. A chilling sight awaited them as they spotted a large axe resting on the stove nearby, carrying evidence of the horrific crime. Meanwhile, In the living room, Julie's young son, Luke, who was 3 years old, sat on the couch completely stunned and unresponsive. Not a tear nor a word escaped him, as if he was frozen in shock. The officer stayed by his side and offered him comfort and support until additional officers arrived at the scene. Following her tragic demise, Julie's body was carefully transported to the Connecticut office of the chief medical examiner for a thorough examination. After conducting a meticulous autopsy, the medical examiner determined the cause of her death to be the chopped wounds and blood impact injuries on the head, torso, and extremities. The detailed findings provided crucial evidence regarding the nature of the attack, shedding light on the tragic circumstances surrounding her untimely demise. As the police took custody of the axe found on the gas stove, they meticulously combed through every inch of the area as they were determined to uncover any potential evidence that could lead them closer to the perpetrator. Inside the house, they embarked on an extensive search, carefully examining each room for any clues that could shed light on the heinous crime. The commotion attracted the attention of concerned neighbors who gathered nearby. The atmosphere was tense as the community was eager to support the investigation in any way they could. Amidst the growing crowd, a helpful neighbor came forward with an unexpected piece of evidence: Ring camera footage from outside his house at Longmeadow Complex. The police eagerly seized the opportunity, hoping that the footage might hold a crucial clue. As they watched the footage, they witnessed an unsettling sight: an individual walking with an axe in hand closely resembling the description provided by Nicholas. The discovery sent a wave of anticipation through the investigators as they realized they might have found a significant lead. The police began to look into who this man with the axe could be. That very day, on December 6, 2022, a crucial breakthrough took place when a concerned woman called the police, recounting a chilling phone call from her son. In her trembling voice, she shared the shocking revelation that her son just called her and said that he killed his girlfriend. The urgency in her words spoke in immediate response from law enforcement. Determined to unravel the truth, they swiftly tracked down the woman and engaged her in conversation. It was then revealed that the man responsible for this ominous confession was none other than Ewan DeWitt, the 42-year-old man who was once in a relationship with Julie. With this vital information in hand, the police dialed Ewan's number, hoping to engage him in a crucial conversation. However, their efforts were met with resistance as Ewan abruptly hung up the call. So it was important for the police to look into Ewan's history, which they believed could provide them vital information needed to proceed further. Born in the town of Roxbury in 1979, Ewan Anthony DeWitt possessed a diverse range of interests and pursuits. As a talented athlete, he pursued his passion for ice hockey and even reached the level of playing semi-professionally. Ewan's thirst for knowledge led him to obtain a bachelor's degree in history from Siena College, showcasing his intellectual curiosity. He was not a person who'd be satisfied from a single vocation, so he also embarked on the journey to become a firefighter. Additionally, Ewan also shared his expertise as a personal trainer. In February 2006, Ewan was arrested in Connecticut for driving under the influence and traffic offenses. He pleaded guilty, resulting in a suspended prison sentence and probation. After this, Ewan DeWitt's journey took an inspiring turn when he joined the prestigious ranks of the U.S. Marine Corps in February 2009, where he embarked on a path as a skilled weapons specialist and non-commissioned officer. He served his country for 5 years and attained the rank of Lance Corporal in February 2011. In a remarkable photo from his time in the Marines, Lance Corporal Ewan DeWitt is seen in action as a machine gunner. The picture shows him courageously operating a powerful M250 caliber machine gun on a vehicle during an important defense of the amphibious task and forced naval exercise. The event took place on December 3, 2011 aboard the USS Chima. With his leadership qualities and expertise, he assumed the role of a machine gun section leader in the esteemed 1st Reconnaissance Battalion. Ewan dedicated himself to his duties, serving multiple tours in Afghanistan, the Middle East, and other classified locations with his dedicated brothers. Ewan and his brothers' inspiring story was captured in a 2015 article in the Register Citizen, highlighting their collective efforts to restore a piece of history. Ewan's life took a darker turn when he faced legal trouble. In November 2019, the Milford police arrested him for assaulting a victim, which resulted in a protective order being issued by the court. The case remains unresolved as court records revealed that it was still pending. With his next court date scheduled for April 14, 2023, Ewan maintained his innocence by pleading not guilty. He was released on a $20,000 bond awaiting the judicial process to unfold. Ewan's troubled past included a disturbing incident in which he was arrested for his actions towards Julie shortly after the birth of her son. Reports stated that he'd thrown a large object at Julie Minogue and had also destroyed her phone to prevent her from calling for help. Fearing for her safety, Julie sought refuge at a neighbor's house in contact of the authorities. The incident highlighted the alarming nature of Ewan's behavior and its impact on those around him, adding another layer of intensity to the unfolding events. In 2021, he faced charges of assaulting emergency personnel and a female in Wake County, North Carolina. Court records indicated that he pleaded guilty and received a combined jail sentence of 95 days, although the exact duration of his incarceration remained unknown. These encounters with the law showcased a pattern of concerning behavior, raising further questions about Ewan's character and past actions. Behind Ewan to its troubled history, a darker pattern of violence emerged, specifically targeting Julie Minogue. Several protective orders were filed against Ewan due to previous instances of domestic violence. These orders were issued in November 2019 and January 2021 and were put in place to safeguard not only Julie, but also the children who were present during those incidents. One such incident involved Ewan being intoxicated and engaging in a heated argument with Julie. According to a statement provided by the victim's son, Ewan had thrown a playpen at Julie's head, which resulted in a distressing injury. While Ewan was in rehabilitation, Julie took steps to file a restraining order, seeking protection from his harmful actions. Despite this, Ewan was granted visitation rights, which left a lingering sense of unease and concern about the safety of those involved. In addition to their troubled relationship, Julie and Ewan DeWitt found themselves entangled in family court cases beginning in 2021. It all began when Julie filed a petition for child support for their son Luke in August 2021. In October 2021, a judge ruled in her favor and ordered Ewan to provide financial support. As tensions continued to escalate, Ewan took Julie to court in December 2021, seeking resolution regarding visitation rights. The court intervened and granted supervised visitation for Ewan in April 2022 with a scheduled hearing in April 2023 to further address the matter. These legal battles shed light on the complexities and challenges faced by Julie and Ewan as they navigated their post-relationship dynamics. As the investigation progressed, new details were revealed that on November 14, 2022, just 3 weeks before her death, Julie took a decisive step by visiting the Milford Police Department to file a complaint against Ewan. She alleged that he'd bombarded her with over 200 text messages within a span of just 2 days, despite the existence of a protective order that explicitly forbade him from contacting her. Officer Scott Nablin listened to Julie's concerns and diligently collected evidence of the text messages from her phone, further solidifying the case against Ewan. In a heartfelt plea for protection, Julie Minogue expressed her deep concern for her safety and the well-being of her children in a sworn affidavit submitted on November 17, 2022. Determined to put an end to the ongoing abuse, she stated, "I don't believe I should endure this mistreatment any longer." Fearful of the consequences, she detailed the relentless harassment she faced. Julie Minogue also wrote in the document that Ewan has got himself into a lot of trouble with drugs and alcohol, and I'm scared he's going to kill me. Officer Nablin, resolute in his pursuit of justice, meticulously crafted an arrest warrant, alleging Ewan's violation of the protective order. The document, filled with crucial details, was reviewed by supervisor, ensuring its accuracy and validity. They made sure that the arrest warrant application contained the requisite probable cause to support the charge that the text messages sent by Ewan DeWitt violated the modified protective order that was issued on January 15, 2021. On November 21, 2022, the court reopened the warrant application and made its way to the Milford State's Attorney's Office. However, the story took an unexpected turn as the Assistant State's Attorney, committed to thoroughness, sent the warrant application back to Officer Nablin and requested further information before proceeding. In this delicate dance between law and justice, Every step forward demanded meticulous attention to detail. However, on December 1st, 2022, Julie Minogue successfully obtained a civil restraining order from a judge. In the hearing, which lasted about an hour, Julie presented evidence of the text messages, Ewan's struggles with substance abuse, mental health issues, and a history of violence. She expressed concern for Ewan's well-being, describing his bipolar rage and erratic behavior, and emphasized the importance of him receiving proper treatment and therapy. Julie firmly believed that Ewan should not be allowed around anyone until he'd received the necessary help and support. Recognizing the imminent danger she faced, a no-contact restraining order was swiftly issued on December 1st, 2022, providing a legal shield against any further interaction with Ewan. But this order took a darker turn when, 5 days later, Ewan killed Julie with an axe in her condo. Now all the evidence indicated that Ewan was the main focus of the investigation, and the search for him intensified as the police tirelessly canvassed the area around the Salem Walk condominium, leaving no stone unturned. Their efforts led them to a dive bar on Ocean Avenue in West Haven, where they sought the assistance of the local community. They approached patrons, informing them about the ongoing investigation and urging them to notify the authorities that they spotted Ewan DeWitt. It was during this concerted effort that two observant individuals caught sight of a person who matched the suspect's description. Eager to aid the investigation, they immediately flagged down the police, providing crucial information about the suspect's whereabouts. Engaging with one of the witnesses, who preferred to remain anonymous, the police learned that the individual had witnessed someone resembling the suspect wandering around the parking lot for a brief period. Eventually, the suspect entered a food truck located in the parking lot. Acting swiftly, the police converged on the scene. Without incident, they apprehended Ewan DeWitt on December 6, 2022, bringing him into custody and moving one step closer to uncovering the truth. The police initiated a rigorous interrogation of Ewan about the early hours of December 6, 2022. Initially, Ewan maintained a stoic silence, withholding vital information. However, after hours of intense questioning, a breakthrough occurred. Ewan finally confessed to the gruesome act of taking Julie's life with an axe. He revealed that he'd silently entered the house through the kitchen window, concealing himself in anticipation of his victim's arrival. When Julie eventually entered the kitchen, he launched an attack, wielding the axe with deadly intent. It was during this horrifying moment that Nicholas, Julie's son, descended the stairs and confronted the scene. Overwhelmed with fear, Ewan fled, leaving the axe behind on the gas stove. Ewan's admission sent shock waves through the investigation, bringing forth a chilling account of the tragic events that unfolded that night. During Ewan's initial court appearance in State Superior Court in Milford on December 7, 2022, Assistant State Attorney Alana Paul informed the judge about new developments in the case. She revealed that you had fully admitted to the incident. But even without that admission, she believed the evidence against him was substantial. Attorney Paul highlighted the presence of surveillance footage necessary. Emphasizing the gravity of the situation, Judge Arden Groggins set his bond at $5 million. The judge expressed concerns about Ewan's history of disregarding court orders and emphasized the importance of public safety. In light of the circumstances, Ewan was placed on suicide watch with a hearing scheduled for December 14, 2022 to further address the case. Finally, it was the day of the final decision. On December 14, 2022, in addition to the murder charge, Ewan DeWitt faced multiple other charges brought forth by the Milford police. These included criminal violation of a protective order, criminal violation of a restraining order, risk of injury to a minor, and reckless endangerment. By levying these charges, law enforcement sought to address the broader scope of Ewan's alleged actions and their impact. A hearing was scheduled for Ewan to its pending criminal cases on April 6, 2023. He has yet to plead. Prosecutors stated that Ewan already confessed to the murder of Julie Minogue. However, no further information has been released by the police about the hearing. In the statement, the family expressed their determination to take action and ensure that those who neglected their responsibilities are held accountable. They also expressed their hope that this case would serve as a catalyst for improved protections for individuals facing domestic violence and abuse. With their unwavering commitment, the family aims to bring about positive changes and prevent such tragic incidents from occurring in the future. This case involved a combination of diligent efforts by law enforcement and the heinous acts of a killer who killed his ex-girlfriend in a rage of anger. Lauren Agee was a 21-year-old student from Hendersonville, Tennessee. She lived with her mother, Sherry, stepfather, Michael, and her 3 siblings. She was in her year studying criminal science at university and had recently started a great relationship. Popular, funny, outgoing, and sporty, Lauren was thriving in all aspects of her life, and she showed a lot of promise for her future. Mid-July 2015, just a few weeks shy of her 20th birthday, Lauren told her mother, Sherry, that she had been invited to go to Wakefest on the July. Wakefest is a 3-day-long festival based at Center Hill Lake in Nashville, Tennessee. People compete in wakeboarding tournaments and water sports during the day, and party and dance throughout the night. For sporty and sociable Lauren, this was an exciting opportunity, but her mom, Sherry, wasn't as keen on the idea. Sherry quizzed her daughter on the details, including who she would be going with. Lauren said she was going with her friend, Hannah Palmer. Sherry didn't entirely trust Hannah because of how much she was in and out of Lauren's life and felt very uneasy about the situation. However, on Friday, July, Lauren and Hannah headed off for the festival. Sherry said as soon as her daughter started walking to the car, she begged her to come back for one last hug. She told Lauren to be careful and to take care. Lauren and Hannah were on social media documenting their road trip while en route to the festival. They arrived at Wakefest in the late afternoon, and sometime after, the girls met up with Aaron Lilly, Hannah's boyfriend, and his friend, Christopher Stout. Although the girls both knew Aaron, this was the time they were meeting Chris. According to witnesses, Chris was attracted to Lauren and appeared glued to her, but she was in a happy relationship and she wasn't interested. They all drank, danced, and partied in the bars into the late evening. Upon the group deciding to head to bed, Lauren received a shock. She was under the impression they would be sleeping in one of the cabins or on one of the houseboats. However, for unknown reasons, the sleeping arrangements were far from that. We're in a canoe. Where's the house? I'm like, it's a cliff on both sides. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. Where do we look at? Cat trap. They were actually camping at the top of a narrow cliff that stuck out over the water. Although it was never set up to be a sleeping location, it was common knowledge amongst everyone that this was somewhere you could go and camp if you chose to. Over the years, festival attendees had tied a rope to the trees that led to the cliff to help people reach the top. A few other people were camping up there as well, but Lauren's group consisted of Hannah, Aaron, Chris, and another slightly older man, Brixton Gambrell. Lauren had only packed a sleeping bag for the night, and it was evident that this new sleeping plan was not something she had prepared for. The cliff itself had a 90-foot drop down one side and an almost 50-foot drop down the other. The boys had built a tent for Hannah and Aaron to sleep in and a hammock for Chris and Lauren. This bothered Lauren as she had already made it clear that she wasn't interested in Chris. The hammock was suspended between 2 trees over the edge of the cliff, and this was undoubtedly hazardous and dangerous. The next day, Saturday the 25th, the group headed off for some more of the same, watching the water sports, drinking, dancing, and partying. At some point during the day, the group allegedly decided to do some cliff jumping. The cliffs in the area were steep and high, and the water was filled with hidden rocks. It was alleged that when Lauren jumped, she hit the back of her head and was left unconscious for a few seconds. Despite this, Lauren seemingly recovered and appeared back to her normal self later that evening. The group carried on into the night and nothing seemed amiss. As the evening rolled around, another friend of Lauren's named Cassie Franks, who was also at the festival separately, said she bumped into Lauren's group at the bar in the marina. Cassie was also the ex-girlfriend of Aaron Lilly. She, along with many others, said it was very apparent that Aaron's friend, Chris Stout, had taken a liking to Lauren, but the feeling clearly wasn't mutual. She reported that she felt like Lauren was having to put up with Chris, almost acting as Hannah's wingman. Lauren also raised her concerns with Cassie about going back to sleep on the cliff that night. Cassie knew the fear that Lauren was feeling all too well as she had spent a night up there a few years prior. Lauren was so nervous that she asked Cassie if she could stay with her group instead. Cassie said she had to decline as they had no more room. At some point during the night, Lauren sent text to one of her friends saying that she wanted to come home and was no longer enjoying herself. She said her friends were being mean to her and she just wanted to leave. Eventually, the group decided to call it a night between 2:30 and 3:30 a.m. The next morning, Hannah, Aaron, and Chris said they all awoke to find Lauren missing. Her belongings were also by the hammock, but Lauren was nowhere to be seen. However, they didn't raise the alarm. They said that they had just assumed she had simply headed off down the cliff to start enjoying the day without them, but she left her shoes, phone, and purse. So although possible, this theory didn't seem to make much sense. Sherry was now panicking as she hadn't heard from her daughter since the Saturday, and it was now Sunday. She began frantically calling and texting her daughter, but to no avail. Tragically, at 4:30 p.m. that Sunday, a fisherman and his son made a gruesome discovery. Lauren Agee was face down and floating in the water. It was evident that she had been dead for some time. The police arrived on scene and began a recovery process. While this was happening, Aaron Lilly paddled around the corner in a canoe and went straight over to the police. He asked if they had seen his friend, as she had gone missing. Harry and Diana Elder, a couple who were also on the scene, said this encounter played on their minds. There had been no announcement to say that a body had been found in that location, and the timing of Aaron's entry onto the scene seemed odd. One of the officers on scene would later say that he believed Aaron had staged this encounter, and that the group likely already knew where Lauren's body was. Aaron, Chris, and Hannah were all brought back to the mainland and questioned. According to police, Aaron and Chris's demeanors appeared nervous. Aaron was overheard telling the others not to mention anything and to let him do the talking. Neither Aaron, Chris, or Hannah mentioned Brixnagamber in their statements. Although no polygraphs were ever performed, they were all questioned individually, and the stories and accounts that the three had began to change and differ massively. Despite all of Lauren's belongings being there, Aaron Lilly claimed that she had stayed at the bar in the marina and never came back to the cliff with them. This was disputed by Detective Prisiarchik. He was an off-duty police officer working as security for Wakefest. He remembered seeing all four of them in a canoe heading for the cliff that night at sometime around 2:30 a.m. Aaron Lilly would later change his story and said that he believed Lauren had headed off to the cliff to meet an old boyfriend. Hannah Palmer told the police that Lauren had left that morning and joined a boat of unknown people. She assumed that she had gone to spend the night with them and would return in the morning. However, during a Skype interview, Hannah would later say that she wondered if Lauren had gone to the toilet during the night and fallen off the side of the cliff. That Skype interview was interrupted by Aaron phoning Hannah, telling her to stick to the story. In Christopher Stout's written statement, he referred to Lauren as the girl and said that Lauren had returned to the campsite for only a few minutes before saying she was leaving to meet an ex-boyfriend. He said he had then fallen asleep and didn't feel her get out of the hammock that they were both in. Just one day after the festival had ended, he spoke about how good the weekend had been on Instagram, showing no signs that anything sinister had occurred. In the background of the shots, Hannah and Aaron are also visible. It remains unclear as to whether or not Briggs and Gambrill gave any form of statement. Some of the interviews were recorded, and the group could be heard giving various different accounts. An autopsy was carried out and determined that Lauren's cause of death was blunt force trauma and possible drowning. She had a broken nose and fingers, and her body was bruised and battered. It was also determined that she had very little water in her lungs despite being submerged. Her blood alcohol level was twice the legal limit. She also had some distinctive markings and impressions on her body, including a triangle shape on her chest. Detective Chris Yarchik, who had watched her leaving that night, also helped in the recovery of Lauren's body. He said that he saw what he believed to be a bite mark on her chest, as well as substantial bruising to her thighs. He suggested at the time that a rape test kit be done, but no such test was performed, and her body was never swabbed for DNA. 911 calls were lost, text messages were erased, and recordings of some interviews weren't made, and the crime scene was completely contaminated. It was eventually concluded that she had fallen down the side of the cliff while intoxicated, and her death was ruled as an accident. It was also determined that there was no foul play involved, and it was nothing more than a very tragic, drunken incident. With this, DeKalb County Sheriff's Department closed the case. Sherry's gut instinct told her that this was wrong and begged for the case to be re-examined. These requests were all denied. Hannah Palmer, Chris Stout, Aaron Lilly, and Brixner Gambrell were never considered suspects by the DeKalb County Sheriff's Department. Hannah and Aaron married and moved to Florida where they had a baby. Chris Stout was in and out of jail due to various parole violations and DUIs, and Brixton Gambrell moved out of state and obtained a lawyer. None of them attended Lauren's funeral, and none of them have commented or publicly engaged with the case since it closed. Cassie Franks, Lauren's friend and Aaron's ex-girlfriend, agreed with Lauren's mother Sherry, and she had concerns about what had happened that night too. She said that Aaron was violent with her during their relationship and that he had choked, bitten, and beaten her. Cassie had taken pictures of her body after these attacks and even offered them to the DeKalb County Sheriff's Department. However, they declined to look at them, stating the case was closed and Aaron wasn't a suspect. Aaron also had a history of DUIs, as did Chris Stout. Just days after Lauren had been laid to rest, Sherry received a phone call from Ryan Mallinson, an officer with the White County Police Department. He, along with Chris Yarchik, was on scene when Lauren was found. Sherry said that he told her the investigation was not handled correctly, and he believed that the people she was there with was somehow involved in her death. Sherry then spoke with both he and Detective Chris Yarchik. Both were deeply concerned by the behavior they had seen from both investigators and Lauren's friends. Hannah, Aaron, and Chris continued to party for the weekend and were active on social media, despite the fact that Lauren was missing. Yarchik believed that the strange triangular print upon her body was a match for the tip of a canoe, exactly like the one he saw them heading off to the cliff in. However, that theory was quickly thrown out by the sheriff's office. They said that the mark had been made while pulling her onto the rescue boat. Yarchik, among with many others, believed that Lauren had already died when she went into the water, which could have explained the lack of water in her lungs. However, as Yarchik wasn't an officer with the investigating department, he had no authority to reopen the case. He did, however, encourage Sherry to pursue it. Off the back of this, Sherry hired a private detective by the name of Sheila Wysocki, and her course of action was to have Lauren's autopsy notes re-examined. This look concluded that Lauren had hemorrhaging in her throat. According to Sheila, the hemorrhaging was a result not of being strangled, but of being held down. Sheila also wanted answers from the police regarding the rape test kit and why one hadn't been carried out. The answer she received was that because Lauren had been wearing a tampon, she couldn't have been sexually assaulted. Therefore, no such test was deemed necessary. Sheila discovered that Lauren wasn't actually menstruating at the time. She contacted Lauren's GYN practitioner, and they found that the lining of Lauren's uterus confirmed she hadn't been on her cycle. Sheila also disputed the details surrounding the infamous cliff jump in which Lauren supposedly hit the back of her head. She argued that while Lauren did jump off the cliff, she didn't go into the waterhead nor did she pass out, and there was no bruising. Sherry, Sheila, and Chris Yarchik also ran some experiments and tests using a 105-pound crash test dummy. The dummy was thrown off both the 90-foot side of the cliff and the 50-foot side. On the 90-foot side, the current of the water at the time wasn't consistent with where Lauren's body had been found. If she had fallen in, she would have floated towards the marina in the opposite direction. The drop on the 50-foot side was so filled with ledges, trees, and rocks that it seemed impossible to roll continuously to the bottom without something getting in the way. They used the crash test dummy almost 50 times, and every time garnered the same result. A witness named Chris Brown came forward and said that he had seen who he was sure was Aaron Lilly on the night Lauren was last seen alive. He claims that at around midnight, he saw Aaron coming out of the water, spluttering and spitting water out for several minutes. Aaron said that he had almost drowned swimming over to the marina area. This tip was turned over to the DeKalb County Sheriff's Department, and they advised that should they want to pursue this lead, they would be in contact. But that call never came. His statement remains a gray area, however, as the time frame of midnight doesn't match up with the 2:30 a.m. time that the majority of witnesses talked about. During an interview with Crime Watch Daily, the family's private investigator, Sheila Wysocki, said that she had been following up on some false stories that had been circulating around social media. She said some of the information was coming from an IP address in Florida, matching the same street that Hannah and Aaron's house was on. Sheila and Sherry believed that this was no coincidence. Sheila was convinced that the answers lay with Hannah Palmer, Aaron Lilly, Christopher Stout, and Brixton Gambrell. In February, Lauren's family filed a $10 million wrongful death lawsuit against the four of them in a bid to force them to talk. Aside from Chris Stout, they all ended up pleading the amendment. Because Chris Stout was in jail at the time, pleading the may have impacted his sentence, so he took part in a deposition. This lawsuit also highlighted a lot of flaws in the handling of the case, and officers were forced to admit that a lot more could and should have been done. In February, Sherry's wrongful death lawsuit against the group was dismissed, ruling that there was insufficient evidence. Circuit Court Judge Jonathan Young threw the case out, deeming it to be ridiculous and pulled out of thin air. Sherry was told that it may only be possible to proceed if she agreed to a gagging order preventing her from talking about the case publicly, something she felt would hinder rather than help. After the lawsuit was thrown out, over 20,000 people signed a petition begging for the case to be reopened. At the start of February 2019, the Nashville Court of Appeals overturned the ruling made regarding Hannah Palmer's potential involvement in the case. It was unanimously referred to as a clearly erroneous assessment of the evidence. The court ruled that Sherry absolutely had a clear and legal right to sue for wrongful death. Despite all of this, the case currently sits in limbo, and Lauren's family and Shiga Wysocki continue their fight for answers and justice for Lauren Agee. At this stage, it is unknown whether or not the full story about what happened that night will be brought to light. But Sherry Smith is determined to fight for her daughter for as long as it takes. In February, the body of 36-year-old Sabrina Payne was found in a field near Tremont, Illinois. Sabrina was a black female who was known to support a drug habit with prostitution. Sabrina had last been seen at her home 2 days before her body was found. The original autopsy failed to determine a cause of death, leaving some of the detectives to believe she had overdosed. One detective, however, felt uneasy about that assumption. His suspicions were confirmed as more bodies were found in Peoria and Tazewell counties over the next year. On February 5, 2004, the body of 36-year-old Barbara Williams was found in a ditch near Edwards, Illinois. She was found clothed and lying face down in the snow. She had been seen alive between 9 and 10 p.m. the night before. An autopsy showed that she had multiple contusions and abrasions on her body. Toxicology showed that she had fatal levels of cocaine in her blood. At this point, police were not ready to call this a murder or entertain the idea of a serial killer preying on black drug-addicted prostitutes. In February, 32-year-old Shakanda Thomas was reported missing. She had last been seen by her family in August. Shakanda was known to disappear at times, but when she didn't come back after several weeks, her family reported her missing. Shirley Entrap was also reported missing in February. She was seen 3 days before she was reported missing. Tamara Walls was reported missing in February after not being seen for 3 weeks. All 3 missing women were also black females known to support a crack cocaine habit with prostitution. 36-year-old mother of 8, Laura Lawler, disappeared from her home after leaving with a man and woman. Her longtime partner searched for her, but only was able to determine she had been with a man named Larry. Her boyfriend and father to her 7 daughters and 1 son describes Laura as the love of his life and a beautiful soul. The two had experimented with crack cocaine, and Laura seemed to struggle with addiction before her disappearance. On September 25, 2004, Linda Neal was found on King Road in Tazewell County. She was found nude along the side of the road. Linda, like the other women, was known to be part of the drug scene in Peoria. At this point, police had determined there was likely a serial killer stalking black females in the Peoria area. A task force was formed, which one detective states would have occurred much quicker if the victims had been white females. While police desperately searched for the killer, they kept a close eye on women in the community at risk. Despite their efforts, on October 15, 2004, Brenda Irving's body was found in a ditch near Farmington. Brenda was found nude, and an autopsy determined that she had been strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to her head. She also had fatal levels of cocaine in her system at the time of her death. Her children had feared for their mother's safety, as she had known many of the women who had been killed or disappeared from central Illinois. Prenda struggled with drug addiction. Despite detectives' best efforts, the case proved difficult to solve. They followed thousands of leads, but finally got the lead they were waiting for in February. 35-year-old Vicky Boehmer was arrested for theft. From jail, she told authorities that she thought she could help them find the serial killer preying on her fellow sex workers. She believed that a man who had picked her up in July 2004 was responsible. Boehmer explained that in July, a man named Larry Bright lured her to his mother's home while they shared alcohol and drugs. Once she was intoxicated, she said Bright attacked her, attempted to rape her, and pulled a knife on her. Somehow, Boehmer was able to escape. Police were at first skeptical as Boehmer asked for a plea deal in exchange for her testimony. Why hadn't she reported this back in July? Why wait until she was under arrest? Vicky Boehmer claimed she was scared of being arrested for outstanding warrants, which is why she did not come forward in July 2004. A search of her criminal history confirmed the warrants, so detectives decided to take a look at the man named Larry Bright. Larry Dean Bright was born in Peoria, Illinois, on July 8, 1966. He served a 2-year stint in prison at age 19 for burglary and carjacking. According to Larry's family, the time Larry spent in prison changed him for the worse. Larry became more angry and violent and became using drugs. Larry had an injury, which started an addiction to prescription opioids and later crack cocaine. He also developed an addiction to pornography, preferring videos with black women. Larry lived with his mother in a tiny guest house behind her home. Larry enjoyed gardening, creating a beautiful garden bed of flowers for his mother. When the police arrived at Larry's home following the tip, they noticed the beautiful flowers in the garden. Larry was placed under arrest for the unlawful restraint of Vicky. They questioned Larry about the murders, but he denied having any information about the murdered and missing women. Throughout the interview, Larry smoked several cigarettes. Detectives planned to take one of the cigarette butts and test it for DNA, but Larry ate them before leaving the interrogation room. Larry declined to give DNA voluntarily. Police searched Larry Bright's home on January 20, 2005. The investigators dug up the garden, finding several small bone fragments and ashes that were later determined to be human. When the police questioned Larry again, they told him they were digging up his mother's flowers. At this point, Larry broke down and confessed to multiple murders. He even led investigators to the remains of some of his victims. Larry explained that around July 27, 2003, he picked up Sabrina Payne on the south side of Peoria. He drove her to his home, which he shared with his mother. He claimed the two drank and used cocaine before having consensual sex. Larry said he did not intend to tell Sabrina, but he became enraged, thinking Sabrina was trying to rip him off. He strangled her to death and dumped her body near the cornfield where she was found. Larry confessed to picking up Barbara Williams in February 2004. Again, he used drugs and alcohol with his victim. He stated that he once again lost control of his anger and killed Barbara. He claimed he caught Barbara stealing from him. He dumped her body along the road where she was found the next day. The prosecution believed that after the first two murders, Larry developed a bloodlust. At the time of his arrest, he said, "I knew them I would kill, the others I would pick up. I went out hunting." Larry also confessed to killing Laura Lawyer. He burned her body in his backyard burn pit, burying the remains in his mother's yard. He said he wanted to destroy the bodies to avoid getting caught. He confessed to killing Tamara Walls and burning her remains. Her jawbone was found in the backyard. He admitted to strangling, beating, and burning Shirley and Trapp. Shakanda Thomas had the same fate after being picked up by Larry Bright. He burned the woman and buried the ashes in the yard. Because of his attempts to creamy his victims, he was nicknamed the Bone Crusher. Larry said that he attempted to burn Lyndon Neal and Brenda Irving as well, but the attempts were unsuccessful due to the weather. He dumped both women along the side of the road. Larry was facing the death penalty following his January 2005 arrest. In an attempt to spare his mother the embarrassment of a trial and avoid the death penalty, Larry Bright pleaded guilty to 7 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of drug-induced homicide on May 30, 2006. Bright's murders were not considered racially motivated, but detectives believe he was just attracted to black women. He is one of the very few serial killers who chooses victims outside of his race. Larry was sentenced to 7 life sentences without the possibility of parole to be served concurrently. He was also given an additional 30 years for the drug-induced homicide. As part of the plea deal, Larry will be required to serve 100% of his sentence with no parole consideration. Larry is currently housed at the Shawnee Correctional Center in Vienna, Illinois. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars, but that brings little peace to the families of his victims. The loved ones of Larry's victims want people to know that the women he killed were more than just drug addicts or prostitutes. They were people. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, and friends. The serial killer dentist of St. Louis, Clennon Engelman. Dr. Clennon Engelman was born on February 6, 1927 in St. Louis, Missouri. Dr. Engelman grew up on the south side of the city and felt a deep connection to his neighborhood. After serving in the military, Dr. Engelman used his GI Bill to go to Washington University and become a dentist. He opened his dental office on the south side of St. Louis, serving the community he had always loved. Dr. Engelman, who went by Clen, was married to a woman named Edna Ruth, but they divorced in 1956. By 1958, both Clen and Ruth had remarried. Clen was operating his dental office and appeared to be successfully serving the St. Louis community. On December 17, 1958, citizens in Forest Park noticed a bloody man stumbling. The man, James Stanley Bullock, soon passed from his injuries. These injuries were caused by a gunshot. No one could figure out why someone would shoot 28-year-old James Bullock. James Bullock was born on April 17, 1931 in DeSoto. He was raised in Shiloh, Illinois by his grandparents and later his aunt after his parents passed away. According to an article from 1938, the then 7-year-old was living with his grandparents in 1938 and enjoyed attending school and fishing. James later served in the military before returning to St. Louis to work and go to college. Back in St. Louis, James met Edna Ruth, the ex-wife of Dr. Glenn Engelman. The two married, and 6 short months later, James was dead. An employee at a local sanitarium initially claimed James was there 4 days before his murder, asking to be admitted because he feared for his life. His wife and aunt said this was not true, as the three had dinner together on that night. According to his widow and aunt, James was not afraid for his life, and they knew no one who would want him dead. However, Edna Ruth benefited greatly from her husband's death. Ruth had life insurance policies totaling $64,088. While under questioning, Edna Ruth made several weird statements, including telling the police she was married before, but her husband did not know. Who was she married to? Her husband's dentist, Dr. Glenn Engelman. Edna Ruth had lied to James and his family and lied on the marriage application about being married before. Police questioned a local career criminal who was out on parole for an assault at the time of the shooting. They weren't able to tie him to the murder of James, but they did note he lived near Dr. Engelman's office. Dr. Engelman and Edna Ruth both refused to take a polygraph test and denied any involvement in the murder of James Bullock. Dr. Engelman's new wife, Ida, refused to be questioned by the police. A patient provided an alibi for Dr. Engelman. However, another witness said that they tried to find someone at the office around the time and the office was empty. Edna Ruth invested part of the funds she received after becoming a widow and a doctor. Been bored being a dentist, so he often ventured into other areas of business. This included buying a trike strip along with a partner, Eric Fry. Dr. Engelman had grown to be close friends with Eric and his wife, Sandy. On September 26, 1963, Eric and Dr. Engelman were at the drag strip using dynamite to explode and then fell abandoned cisterns on the property. Eric was lying on his stomach near one of the cisterns when the dynamite exploded quicker than anticipated. Eric was killed instantly and found lying in the bottom of the cistern. Coroner H.D. Steinbeck ruled the death accidental. Mr. Frey's wife had an insurance policy on her husband, which she invested part of into Dr. Engelman's practice. Dr. Engelman divorced Ida and married his third wife, Ruth, in 1967. The couple shared a son, but Ruth heeded the close relationship her husband had with a young woman who worked in his office named Carmen Miranda. Dr. Engelman offered to train Carmen to be a dental assistant in his office. Edna felt uncomfortable with the flirting between the doctor and his young assistant. Dr. Engelman, however, claimed he was trying to help people in his community. He hired Carmen's brother, Nick, as well at one point. Ruth was relieved when Carmen met a married man named Peter Home. Just a few months later, however, Carmen and Eric were walking in a rural area in Pacific, Missouri. The couple were exploring an area known to have caves and scenic paths. A shot suddenly fired, hitting Peter in the head. Peter died instantly, and a hysterically Carmen flagged down the help. Nearby, police found an X on a tree made with tape. The area was familiar to locals as a hunting area, and police believed that the shot was accidental. Police believe someone was target shooting at the accident accidentally struck Mr. Home. Carmen had a significant amount of life insurance on her husband, totaling $60,000. This is equivalent to around $300,000 in 2024. Dr. Engelman and Ruth divorced soon after, at which time Dr. Engelman married young Carmen, whom he had known since she was a small child. His son lived with Edna, his ex-wife. Despite being married to Carmen, Dr. Engelman and Ruth still met regularly for sex. Dr. Engelman Consume had extramarital affairs, which included previous affairs with Carmen, Ruth, and even Sandy Fry, the wife of his business associate Eric Fry, who was killed by dynamite. Another of Dr. Engelman's affairs was with a patient named Barbara Boyle. On November 3, 1977, someone pretending to be from the farm girl walked up to the farmhouse owned by Arthur and Vernita Gueswell in Edwardsville, Illinois. Soon after entering the home, the elderly couple were attacked and both were shot in the head. The wealthy couple left $340,000 to their son, Ronald Guswell. Guess who Ronald Guswell was married to? Barbara Boyle. On April 4, 1979, less than 2 years after the murder of his parents, Ronald Giswell was found dead inside his car outside a hotel in East St. Louis, Illinois. The man had been beaten and shot to death. He had been missing for 4 days when his body was found. Following her husband's murder, Barbara collected his inheritance in addition to several life insurance policies. The equivalent sum of money today would be nearly $1,700,000. Guess who she cut to? Dr. Clennon Engelman. Following the murder of Marmal Guiswell, authorities were starting to notice the trend of connected deaths to Dr. Engelman. His patients and community, however, only saw a generous man committed to helping his community and its citizens. Dr. Engelman was not the greatest dentist, however. He often did a sloppy job of making casts for dentures and dental appliances, requiring the work to have to be redone by the dental lab several times. His business was struggling, however, and he soon found himself in debt with a dental lab owned by Sophie Barrera. Sophie Barrera owned a South St. Louis dental laboratory and had grown tired of waiting for Dr. Engelman to pay up by 1980. She filed a lawsuit against the doctor that was set to go to court just a few days after Sophie was murdered. On January 14, 1980, Sophie entered her vehicle in South St. Louis. Shortly after, the vehicle exploded. Police found remnants of a bomb under her charred vehicle. Sophie had told her son before she was in fear of being killed. She believed Dr. Glenn Engelman was dangerous. Dr. Engelman was questioned for 3 hours and then released. Police were certain he was responsible for Sophie's death, but they had to prove it. The public also wondered if the bombing was related to another bombing in the area that was carried out between two mob families fighting for control over St. Louis labor unions. The evidence indicated, however, that this was not a mob hit. The number one suspect was the man who owed Sophie $15,000. Dr. Engelman had to be stopped, but the police weren't sure how to do it. Detectives soon began having conversations with Dr. Engelman's ex-wife and mother of his son, Ruth. Ruth told police nothing at first, but eventually started to talk. She explained that Dr. Engelman often bragged about killing people. He told her that he had a superpower: he was able to kill without remorse. He had admitted to killing Eric Fry, Peter Home, and the Cuswell family. It was his side hustle, killing for profit. Ruth agreed to help the police, but none of her testimony could be used in court because Dr. Engelman confessed to her while the two were still married. He was protected by spousal privilege. Ruth decided to wear a wire, however, and met up with Dr. Engelman to exchange their son and sometimes just to socialize. They were still having a sexual relationship despite Dr. Engelman's marriage to Carmen. She tried to get Dr. Engelman to confess to her again by asking to write questions. He didn't seem to take the bait at first, and Ruth feared he would kill her next. Ruth suggested police plant a bug in her bedroom and she would invite the dentist over for sex. Dr. Engelman was suspicious, however, and did not say anything that could lead to his arrest. Ruth then met him at a diner wearing a wire, and this time he commented on being homicidally intimate with the widow of one of his victims. He admitted to the murders in great detail, providing just what police needed for an arrest. He explained that he found murder more sexually satisfying than sex. His ex-wife was given a new life in the witness protection program. Carmen, who was no longer married to the dentist, and her brother Nick were brought in for questioning to corroborate the allegations against Dr. Engelman. As possible co-conspirators, they asked for and were granted immunity to testify against the dentist. Carmen told quite the story. She said she was working for the dentist when he suggested she find someone with good benefits to marry. He told her about Eric Fry, whom he said he directed Sandy Fry to marry with all intentions of murdering the insurance proceeds. Soon after she was married, Carmen said Dr. Engelman told her where to go and made sure her husband was shot and killed. He staged it to look like a target shooting accident. Clennon Engelman was finally arrested and charged with murder in 1980. Carmen testified at Dr. Engelman's first trial, for which he was convicted of murdering Peter Hom and given 50 years in prison. The dentist then pled guilty to the murder of Sophie Barrera to avoid the death penalty. Serving a list sentence for that murder in Missouri, Dr. Engelman was back in court by 1985 in Illinois. In 1984, Robert Handy, a conduct and acquaintance of Dr. Engelman, admitted to authorities that he had taken part in the murder conspiracy of the Geiswold family. He implicated Dr. Engelman, who had bludgeoned Harmeld Geiswold and Shahim, as well as Ronald's widow, Barbara Boyle. Dr. Engelman was given 3 life sentences for the Geiswold murders. He also was convicted of federal mail fraud and given a 30-year federal sentence. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, including conspiring with his first wife to kill her husband, James Bullock, in 1958. Edna Ruth was never charged in the case due to lack of evidence. Barbara Boyle went on trial for the murder of her in-laws, Arthur and Vernita Giswell, and husband Ronald in 1985. The jury acquitted her of the murders of Arthur and Vernita by convicted her of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Ronald Giswell. Barbara Boyle was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 1985. She was granted parole in February 2009. Dr. Engelman enjoyed his notoriety in Missouri, often comparing himself to legendary outlaw Jesse James. He is believed to have killed at least 12 people, but the actual number is unknown. Unlike other serial killers, Dr. Engelman was inspired, at least in part, by greed. He also seemed to revel in his ability to not feel remorse. Dr. Engelman died of diabetes-related health issues in 1999 at age 72. He was incarcerated in Jefferson City at the time. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.